Okay, so the Post-its are in case we don't have time for questions at the end, or if you want to write a question down and leave it up, but it'll be like anonymous and I can answer it later or something. But so A, I'm not a professional. I just want to share what I've learned with you guys. And B, I'm going to throw like a ton of stuff at you, and hopefully like everybody will find something that's useful to them. So if we're just going to get started, this is Haigra. Haigra is Haigra is a UNH rower and has been rowing for a while now, but and is super athletic, but can't seem to make like any new improvements and just doesn't seem to be getting anything out of training. So Haigra has enrolled in a couple sports nutrition classes to kind of see what she can do about it. So we're going to follow Haigra through like a typical day and see kind of what goes on and try and learn from some of Haigra's mistakes. So Haigra, like any UNH rower, has a pretty full day ahead of him/her. And so Haigra did not get a lot of sleep last night, hasn't eaten for like 11 hours since dinner last night, and thinks she should eat something before practice. Coaches are always saying that, but doesn't really have an appetite before practice when she wakes up, and doesn't like the idea of something just kind of hanging out in his/her stomach while she's working out. So, but she's running late, so grabs a protein bar, heads out the door, and makes it just in time to start the warm-up. But Haigra's super tired. So Haigra backs off during the warm-up and wants to kind of save it up for the workout because coaches say they're going to do 3 by 12 minutes of C3 work. And Haigra's really tired, so wants to back off, save it up for the pieces. Piece 1, Haigra pushes through, just feels like there's nothing in her legs, but says that she's just going to get back on the horse and get ready for piece 2. Piece 2, Haigra cannot seem to catch her breath. Have you ever gotten to that point where you just like, you feel like there's no way that no matter how hard you breathe, you just can't get enough air in? That's Haigra right now. But Haigra feels like she is pushing as hard as she possibly can, but not getting the numbers that Haigra wants. By piece 3, Haigra's completely lightheaded, shaking, probably blacking out a little bit. But Haigra thinks that's where she is supposed to be. UNH rowers just push through. So Haigra feels pretty accomplished, even though she's about to pass out. So it's about that time. Haigra's teammates are headed to Hoko for breakfast. But Haigra never really feels hungry after a workout. In fact, Haigra almost feels full. Like the thought of food, there's no appetite, almost feels full, even though she hasn't eaten anything. Plus, Haigra feels like she'll get a chance to eat after class. That's only like an hour away. Not a big deal, not that long. So Haigra goes to class, where they're talking about energy needs. So everyone's probably heard of calories. If anybody hasn't, we'll talk after class. So if you think about calories, they're just food energy. And most of the population, which is largely sedentary, average Jane and Joe, are just trying to get enough energy, usually to either maintain or lose weight. But athletes, like Haigra, do all this extra crazy stuff where they break down their body all the time, and they want it to build back stronger. So Haigra athletes just need more energy overall. Most people probably know that. The reason for that is because the body has about a bajillion energy priorities. Number 1 is the brain. Number 1 energy priority is to get enough energy to the brain all the time. And then after that, there are the vital organs, the heart, all the stuff that needs energy constantly just to keep you alive. Muscle, the stuff that Haigra likes the most, is way down on the priority list, like last priority, because muscle's really expensive. To build muscle means that you've taken care of all your other energy needs for the day, and there's a little bit of bonus energy left over to make this new muscle. But even once it's been made, it's still a luxury to maintain. If the body is not fed enough energy through food, it's going to get it somewhere else, and that's by basically eating itself. The body will sacrifice expensive muscle in a heartbeat to feed the brain. The brain takes up, for like a 2,000 calorie diet, it takes up about 25% of daily calories. The brain itself needs 500 calories a day. So it's way more important to the body than muscle. And Haigra's liking the sound of this because she knows that stuff that tastes really good has a lot of calories in it. And that's just because we've evolved to prefer and be rewarded the taste of stuff that has energy in it because it keeps us alive. So number 1 priority of any athlete in training is just to get enough calories. That's number 1. If you're not getting enough calories, you can't make any gains, even if you're eating good foods. Competitive season, which is basically what we're in right now, we're getting ready for competitive season, is no time to cut weight. There are sports where you can gain an advantage from that, where cutting weight usually equals more speed. Open weight rowing is not one of them. If you're going to cut weight, it's got to be during the off season. You can't make any new gains or get any faster or stronger by trying to cut weight during the competitive season. But Haigra knows, Haigra's thinking about this survey that her team just took, and knows that most people on the team are really interested in just eating for peak performance, and they understand that cutting weight is for a different time of year. So Haigra's pretty psyched to tell everybody about this. All this talk about calories reminded Haigra that she's really hungry, hasn't eaten in a long time, and wants to get all these super quality calories that they just talked about in class. So goes to Hoko and just goes ham. Eats this, that, all these plates of foods, got some peanut butter, got some apples, pancakes. You see mostly all these good calories Haigra's meeting energy needs. But if you look at where they're coming from, it's mostly white carbs and mostly fat, a little bit of protein, tiny bit of plant matter. But Haigra just wanted to feel full, which she does. So Haigra waddles to class, where they're now going to talk about macronutrient needs. So we established that there are calories in food. Specifically, they're in these 3 macronutrients. These are the 3 big players. Vitamins, minerals, we don't actually get any energy from those. It's all in carbs, fat, and protein. But they're all different in the ways that they behave in our bodies and what they do for us eventually when we eat them. And we know that carbs and protein contain the same amount of energy per gram per unit of weight. They both contain 4 calories per gram. Fats contain more than twice that. And so that's why you can eat way more, a much bigger serving of carbs or protein for the same amount of calories that you would get from a smaller serving of fat. So if you look down here at the bottom, those are 3 200-calorie servings of foods that are either predominantly carb, fat, or protein. And if you just look at the units real quick, because I'm going to use these images kind of throughout the presentation. Simple sugars, like glucose and fructose, those are the little yellow diamonds. And then there's starch and fiber, which are just polymers. They're just chains made of those simple sugars. So all Haigra really knows, what she's just learned from class, is that we need to take food energy to turn it into body energy. Especially for athletes, energy is super important to do work. But it's worth taking a second to look at what these things all do for us in the body. So first we'll talk about fat. There's this guy, Vinny Tortorich, he's a crazy personal trainer, cancer survivor, works in LA. Says the worst thing about fat is that it's called fat, which has a pretty negative connotation nowadays. But we need fat. We need it a lot. We need it to make our sex hormones so we don't look like totally ambiguous. We need it to line our nerves. We need it to insulate our important organs and keep us warm and all that stuff. So we do need fat, even though it's been like totally demonized in our culture. The biggest thing you should know about fat, though, is that, let me go back a bit. It loves to be stored. Fat is when we eat fat, it's already in a form that our bodies want to tuck away and save for a rainy day when we don't have any other energy. It's also digested super slowly. Just having fat in the stomach releases hormones that completely slows the digestion of everything you've eaten down. That's why it contributes to fullness, because we eat it and it just kind of sits in our stomach for a really long time. It can take up to like 3 hours for fat that we eat to be absorbed and like enter our bloodstream. So that's why bagel with no peanut butter kind of doesn't fill you up. Bagel with peanut butter or bread with peanut butter hangs out with you for a really long time. So it kind of locks up your stomach contents. The opposite would be carbs, which want to be burned. It's the preferred energy of like all our tissues in the body. All tissues in the body can use carbs to turn them into energy. Stuff like the brain can't burn fat. It has to be turned into carbs first before it can be burned by the brain. And so when you eat carbs, they either go directly into the blood. The simple stuff goes right into the blood and can travel wherever you need it in the body, wherever energy is needed most of all, usually the brain, the heart, the stuff that needs energy constantly. But it can also be stored in our liver and in our muscles as glycogen. And I'm going to talk about glycogen a lot because I think everybody's really going to like glycogen by the time we're done. So you can see the chains of glycogen that get stored up in the liver and in the muscle. And so glycogen is a storage form. We can store carbs, but it's a super temporary form of storage. It's a form that the body can break down and use immediately, unlike fat, which takes a really long time to use. Quick note about fiber, which is also a carb, but we get no energy from fiber. We don't digest fiber and turn it into energy. It also contributes to fullness and takes a really long time to digest, like fat. And it has all kinds of health benefits that they're just learning about now that is good for our digestive health and overall. But what you should remember for now is that it takes a long time to digest and it makes us feel full, like fat. Finally, there's protein, which we learned has energy in it. But protein gets used for a ton of stuff in the body. We know it's in our muscles. It helps transport stuff in the blood that's not water soluble, like fat and other nutrients and vitamins. It repairs our DNA. Our bones are mostly protein. And then my favorite is that it supports your immune health. So protein has all these jobs in the body that it needs to get done, which means that the body really doesn't want to burn it for energy. When you're working out, protein is a teeny tiny percentage of the overall energy contribution. The body would much rather spare the protein and burn whatever else is present, fat or carbs. It really wants to avoid your burning your protein and spare it. So Haigra is excited to put this to work at lunch, learning all the stuff that she's just learned. But she's still pretty full from brunch. All her teammates are going to lunch. But Haigra knows she's not going to have any time to eat before she does a post-set in the afternoon, and is still pretty full, so just grabs some bread to kind of nibble on for a while, which Haigra feels pretty good about because she just learned all that good stuff about storing up carbs. So Haigra heads to the next class. These next couple of minutes are going to be like as deep as we're going to go down like the science rabbit hole, but it's really important stuff that I think you guys are going to find really useful. So this is energy or exercise science class where they're talking about energy pathways, basically just the processes that our body goes through to turn that food energy into body energy. So our evolutionary response to exercise is the same as it is for running for our lives from a predator. Basically, the body wants to shut down energy being used to anything that's not necessary at that time. It doesn't want to spend any time on growth or repair or digestion. The blood flow to the digestive system basically gets stopped. Because the body wants to focus on making energy. That's all it wants. It just wants to make you outrun this tiger, outrun this bear, whatever it needs to do. So that's part of why Haigra doesn't feel full after working out, is the digestive system has basically been depressed by this need to make energy. And this body energy we've been talking about is called ATP, and I only want to talk about it for a second because I want to explain that we can't store ATP. We have to constantly be making it. And we do that by converting the stored food energy that we have into body energy. And the way that gets done completely depends on the activity. So you've got your aerobic activities, mostly thought of as endurance activities. Last a really long time. Endurance is considered anything longer than 2 minutes. And aerobic activities are done at an intensity that's low enough that you can breathe enough to get adequate oxygen to all of your tissues. And that's important because when we burn, aerobic activities burn primarily fat and carbs. And the reason that we burn both of them is because we have the oxygen present to burn fat. Fat cannot be burned without oxygen. That's why, which is why, and like the percentage of carbs and fat that we're burning is completely dependent on the intensity of the activity. So lower intensity, you're burning, even if you're not burning as many calories overall as you would be burning from a high intensity activity, you're burning a higher percentage of fat than you are of carbs. And that's because fat can fuel activities that you're doing for a really long time, because even the lowest like athletes with the lowest percentage of body fat that they can possibly have still have literally thousands of calories of fat stored up in their fat stores. And it's used very slowly and can fuel duration in vents because it takes a really long time for us to burn. The body has to get it out of storage and then convert it into the forms that it needs to turn it into energy. That's part of why the warm-up is important. The warm-up before your workout starts this process out so that it gets the fatty acids where you need them so that it can burn them, or it can start burning them instead of your carbs, which it wants to kind of spare. So those are your aerobic activities. So aerobic activity is great because it can go on for a really long time, but these aerobic systems can't sustain or can't support your maximum speed or power. If you're wanting to go max speed, half power, or max speed, max power, you go anaerobic. That means you're working at such a high intensity that you cannot get adequate oxygen to your tissues. So when Haigra was feeling like she just could not get enough air in her body, it's because she was working at the highest intensity that she could. And you just can't get enough oxygen to the tissues. But anaerobic activities burn primarily carbs without oxygen. You're not getting enough oxygen, and you can't get as much energy out of the carbs, but you can get it really fast. So you can, burning carbs at max intensity supports your max speed and max power. Anything anaerobic is typically within the 1 to 2 minute range, because that's about how long an athlete can sustain maximum power. But the downside of this system, even though it's really fast, we get the energy really quick, is that there's the byproduct of lactic acid, which you all know about. You felt it burning in your legs. So you can get energy really fast from carbs, but you get this lactic acid byproduct. So Haigra's thinking about these two systems, the anaerobic and the aerobic system, and realizes that if she thinks about, oh, and here's the percentage again of higher intensity activities burn greater amount of carbs, and that's because carbs take no time at all to turn into energy. So Haigra starts thinking about these two systems and realizes that a 2K falls somewhere in between. It's maximum intensity for 6 to 8 minutes, which is 300 to 400% of the time that's typically considered a max intensity event. Esther Lofgren, who's on the US national team, is a gold medalist, kind of compares it to powerlifting as fast as you can for 45 seconds. That's the start sequence. You hit that lactic acid wall, and you keep going for another 5 minutes. And so that's a pretty incredible athletic feat. And the way that rowers do that is that if you look at the maximum total energy that you're making during that 2K, that little orange part at the top, that's your anaerobic system. So that's how you're getting your max power, is that you're burning carbs. The way that you're able to do that, even though you're producing all this lactic acid because you're mostly burning carbs, is that your aerobic system is actually recycling that lactic acid back into energy. All your aerobic tissues are taking all the waste that you're making and they're turning it back into useful energy. Because the primary limiting factor of performance during a 2K is metabolic waste buildup. That's why we train so much in the anaerobic region of we train in the lower categories, in the C6 to C4 stuff, because your anaerobic tissues are what are going to be able to keep you going at this max intensity for the time of the 2K. So what that basically means is that rowers are incredibly efficient carb burning machines. And that is why rowers love carbs. They need to eat them because it is their primary #1 fuel source. So Haigra's pretty psyched to hear that, because she's been nibbling on this bread for like 2.5 hours and thinks she's going to the post set, going to totally bang it out. But it just does not happen for Haigra. Can't eke out those last couple reps that she needs. Really just feels like there's nothing left in her system. And Haigra gets really fed up. So Haigra goes to see the sports dietitian to get some answers. So the sports dietitian could give Haigra, or take Haigra's numbers, weight, height, all that stuff, plug it into a spreadsheet, and figure out exactly how many grams of carbs and protein and calories and everything Haigra needs to eat. And I've made a spreadsheet for anybody who wants to do that. But there are some just general guidelines that'll get you through the day. So Haigra's dietitian starts talking about stomach real estate. Athletes, rowers, have really high energy needs that need to be coming from these 3 places, which we'll talk about in a second. But within that, if Haigra's trying to maintain weight or build more lean muscle, she's got a certain amount of energy that she needs during the day, that she's also got to meet all these other vitamin and mineral needs within, which means that Haigra has the stomach real estate, and Haigra's stomach is super valuable, and Haigra should only be choosing like really high quality foods that are going to get her good energy and also a lot of vitamins and minerals. So I've made this, which we'll spend a little bit of time on. I'm also going to send it out afterward. This is kind of a framework that basically gives you kind of a flexibility about what you eat and when based on your training that day. There are no set times that you need to think about for eating. You don't need to be eating lunch at a specific time every single day. It's all about what your training is like that day and what your training demands are for that day that should dictate the choices that you make. And that's to get the most out of your training that you possibly can. If you're going to be spending all these hours, this great percentage of your time training, you should be spending the other whatever percentage of your time to actually make it worth something to you. So take a look real quick at the pre-work snack column. All this, so the stuff on the green is obviously what you should reach for first. The stuff in the yellow is kind of at your own discretion. Everybody's going to kind of find what works for them, but it's stuff that you should usually moderate at whatever time of day it's in. And the stuff in the red is you'd do well to avoid. So pre-workout snack, you basically want to top off the tank and get sugar into your blood so that you can preserve your overall glycogen stores. You're topping off your tank with starch or sugar. This is when you want to kind of avoid fiber, protein, and fat, all those things we talked about that just kind of sit in your stomach and make everything else take a really long time to digest. Because you might eat some carbs, but if you're eating them with other stuff that's going to take a really long time to digest, you're probably not going to be able to get the energy from it in the time that you need before your workout. So if we're talking about pre-workout snack within like an hour, you want stuff that you're going to digest super fast, like carbs. White breads, sports and energy drinks. Drinking sugar is usually not okay for the rest of the population, which is largely sedentary. For athletes and rowers especially, drinking slowly something full of carbs right before your workout is going to be good. I say limit fruits just because of the fiber. And if it's, obviously if it's all you have in your dorm, if there's nothing else, it's okay. But that fiber means that it's going to take a long time to digest, and you might not get the energy that you need from it in the time that you work out. So you might eat an apple in the 15 minutes before practice. You're probably not going to digest it in time to get the energy that you want from it. You'd be better off eating something starchy. And then definitely avoid high fiber, high fat stuff. Most of the energy bars that you can get at the store, whether it's like trail mix bars, granola, whatever, really high fiber, high fat, it's just going to sit in your system while you're working out. You're not going to get quality energy from it in time. Post-workout snack, right after a workout is when your muscles are, they're hungry. You've broken them down and they want to soak up nutrients and energy. There's this ideal carb to protein ratio of 4 carbs to 1 protein. And that's because the carbs basically kind of open the gateways to your cells. So the carbs kind of they head into your muscles super fast and they take whatever you're eating with it, like the protein. So the carbs open the gateway and take all the protein with it. And you want this to happen as fast as possible after your workout, because it'll halt the muscle breakdown that you've done. It'll stop breaking your muscles down and it'll start rebuilding immediately. It'll start rebuilding your muscles and it'll start rebuilding your glycogen stores. Which is why I typically don't recommend protein shakes, just because they usually don't contain enough carbs. They might have a lot of sugar in them, but we're going to talk in a second about why the sugar is not necessarily the kind of carb that you want. But again, anything is better than nothing. So if a protein shake is all that you have, go for it. Most people on the survey said that the protein shakes were good because they were portable, they're convenient, they can take them with them and mix them there. I would like to argue that a bagel is just as portable and probably a much better choice. And then post-workout meal, if you're not going to be working out for another 3 hours, balanced meal, which we'll look at in a second. And then a pre-workout meal, meaning a meal that you're going to eat within like 3 hours of training. Typically you want to avoid any kind of discomfort during your workout. You're obviously going to have time to digest and everything, but if you want to avoid discomfort and ensure that you're not still digesting it while you're working out, it's best to kind of keep it light. So focus on getting a lot of carbs, moderate protein. If you're wanting to feel full, if you've got a while before you're going to eat again, fill up on fiber before you fill up on fat. Usually has way more health benefits and you're sure to digest it. You're more likely to digest it in time of your workout. So I'm going to send that out. Everybody can look at that. And then there's also this, just another way to zoom out instead of thinking about it meal by meal, a way to zoom out and kind of look at your whole day. This is developed by the Swiss Society for Sports Nutrition, and they're a pretty big deal. It's European, so you know it's good. And it's a basic food pyramid that most people use, but there are additional servings of certain things that athletes need. And that's going to be available afterward too. Another thing Haigra can do is kind of look at every single meal, try and make each meal kind of look at this or match this profile. So about 75% of the whole plate is half carbs, half of which should be whole grain. And the other half should be plants, so fruits and vegetables, and that's to meet those macronutrient or those micronutrient needs that we've talked about. And then only a quarter of it is protein, which we'll look at in a second. So we're going to look at carbs real quick. There are no, especially for you guys, because you're a special clan that's really active, there are no good carbs and bad carbs. It's kind of best to think about carbs on kind of a spectrum, in the sense that there are only more optimal times for certain carbs than there are for others. So if you look at a carb-based foods, fiber compared to its starch, it kind of just dictates how fast it's going to be digested and how quickly you can get that energy that you want for your workout. So stuff over on the fiber end, like vegetables, which are almost all fiber and usually very little starch, they contribute to fullness and they take a really time to digest, but you're getting nutrients out of them. Fiber is not just about, if you think about grains, whole grains contain the fiber, and that's not, fiber doesn't just give you fullness. The fiber in a grain is where all the grain's nutrients are. So when they say get at least make half your grains whole, that's to get special nutrients and vitamins that are only in the fiber of the grain. So it can't be, so white carbs aren't empty calories for you guys. They're like high octane, high quality fuel. For the rest of the population, they should probably be eating more whole grains. But for you guys, starch is fine. Starch, you want it as your high quality fuel, but you do want to get half whole grains just for the vitamins and minerals that they contain. And then stuff on the other end, the stuff that's strictly carbs or strictly starch, like your white rice. White rice contains a ton of starch. And then sports drinks aren't all the way at the end just because they contain not just sugar, but they also usually contain other stuff that the manufacturer puts in to make you digest it a little slower. And then sweeteners like honey and syrup and stuff that contains mostly sugar, which we'll look at for just a second. But before we look at sugar, I talk about starch, and that's the high quality glucose that we want. The way that you find the starch in something, if you're just looking at the nutrition label, is the fiber, which we don't digest, minus the sugar. And if you're trying to figure out like how many carbs you should be eating within whatever time of your workout, a good number to remember is that we only digest and absorb about 60 carbs or 60 grams of carbs in an hour. That's like usually like 2 small dinner rolls or 3 pieces of bread. When you start to look at the carb content of different things, you kind of just learn to eyeball it, what looks like 60 carbs. So sugar, which a lot of people were really interested about in the survey. Sugar is a carb. It's 2 carbs. It's our friend glucose, but it's also fructose, which is a carb, but it does not behave like a carb in our bodies. We don't store fructose the way that we store glucose. It doesn't. It can be converted into glucose for energy. Like if you're eating sugar like right before your workout, it'll be turned into useful energy. But fructose is very likely in your body to be turned actually into cholesterol. That's why there are a lot of studies now that show that sugar contributes to chronic diseases because it affects your body, they call them negative heart unhealthy fats. So it's a good idea to kind of start thinking of sugar as a fat rather than a carb. And if we're talking about stomach real estate, it is something that can be considered an empty calorie. Even athletes don't get anything out of sugar. There are no vitamins or no minerals. They're just energy, which normally is okay, but it usually has negative effects on our body. And something I like to remember is that 4 grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon of sugar. So if you look at like a soda or something like that that has like let's say 32 grams of sugar, it has 8 teaspoons of sugar in it. Is that math? Yeah, that's math. So that's the spiel about sugar. I had a video. I'm not going to subject you guys to that. So protein is only 1/4 of the whole plate. And that is because you're likely getting way more protein than you need. And it's not that protein is going to harm you. It's more that it's taking up valuable stomach real estate that would probably be better dedicated to carbs. But you do need protein. We talked about all the things that it does in the body. And there are all different sources of protein, which can also be thought of as a spectrum. So, fat's not all bad. There are good and bad fats, which we've all heard about for like our whole lives. But if you look at this, kind of don't think that you need to completely cut the things that down at this end of the end of the spectrum, just kind of think of spending more time, dedicating more of your plate more often to the stuff that's down here rather than down there. Because the stuff at the end, like the red meat, the eggs, cheese, they do contain fat, but they also contain, like any food, every food has something to offer you. So red meat has iron, which we need for our blood. Eggs have stuff that's good for our eyes. Don't ever think that you have to completely cut something out of your diet. Just think about your stomach real estate and what it means for your training that day. Or zoom out and think about it, what you need for your whole week. Like peanut butter should not be limited from the diet. There are just better times to eat peanut butter. There are more optimal times for peanut butter, if that makes sense. So, and just think about, don't look at those grams. Those are not for you guys. That's for the rest of the normal population. But there is protein in stuff that you may not think has protein in it. Carbs almost always also contain protein. Not in a ridiculous amount, the way that something like meat would, or a whey protein shake or something like that, but you are days when I don't even try to get protein, I still meet my protein needs, just because it's in more foods than you think it is. So again, think about it as stomach real estate, and make sure you're meeting, first of all, your overall energy needs. That's number one. Number two is meeting your carb needs. And then number three would be protein. Outside of that, you got to get your plants in, because each, and if you think about it like a rainbow, think about like every color offering you something different. And you don't need to be eating the rainbow at every single meal. That is impossible and really filling and uncomfortable. I have tried. You should just zoom out and think about, again, zoom out and think about it in terms of your whole week. Did you eat purple things on this day and that day? Did you try and eat at least some of each color within every week? Again, if you're trying to go for fullness, get your fullness here. Fill up on your fiber before you fill up on your fat, because you're going to get way more nutrients out of it than you are from the fat. So the sports dietitian is really excited to share all of this stuff with Haigra, because there's literally nothing more exciting than sports nutrition. And so the dietitian talks about the benefits of eating like this, if anybody's not already. It's that the more carbs that you eat, the more carbs you can store. You get better at storing carbs the more you eat them, and you also get better at burning them, because your body basically says, okay, we've got a lot of this stuff that's available to us. We should get really good at using it. So it's just another way to gain an advantage in your training, is to provide constant carbs so the body's constantly getting better at burning them. And the biggest benefit of eating carbs for you guys who train so constantly and multiple times a day usually is that you're replenishing your glycogen between your training bouts. That's a challenge for a lot of athletes, is to make sure that you're rebuilding the glycogen stores that you totally use up during your workout. The other thing is that if you have carbs constantly for your body, which are the preferred energy source, you're protecting your immune system. There are a lot of studies that show that if you're constantly burning carbs and not having to burn other stuff like fat, you're going to have better immune function. So if you've ever had a training, like a period in your training where you constantly feel sick and you constantly feel run down, it's probably because you're not fueling yourself right and your immune system is taking a toll. And carbs are really cheap, so if you shop for yourself, it's easy to buy a lot of carbs that store for a really long time and that you can have, like grains, whole grains, rice, quinoa, things like potatoes store for a really long time, and they're usually really affordable. The downside of this diet is because we digest and use carbs so quickly and so efficiently, you're probably going to be hungry a lot. I think that's okay because you get to eat all the time, and that's really cool. But that is something to keep in mind, is that if you're feeling hungry constantly, you're probably eating the right things. So Haigra's pretty psyched about all this, goes to dinner, eats a pretty balanced meal. Haigra was thinking, you know, I don't just eat one plate of food, I need a lot of plates of food. And that's okay. That's probably the case for most everybody in this room. You need a lot of energy in the day. You've got to be getting a lot of it. You've just flat out got to be training to eat more. Likely you're not getting enough food already. It's a good idea to start just trying to train yourself to eat more. Haigra also grabs something starchy because it's super portable and easy to do, to put in the backpack and eat for later. And then, so Haigra's thinking about her performance throughout the day, and cracks open the books and tries to make some sense of it. And so what we're going to do is look at these lines at the bottom, and they're going to represent Haigra's total glycogen and carbs that Haigra has in the body. So when you sleep, you use carbs. Your carbs are being used to fuel your brain while you sleep. And if you think about it, you go for hours and hours and hours without eating. You're fasting overnight while you sleep. So your glycogen in the morning, Haigra's glycogen is super low. And Haigra wanted to boost it before practice by eating a snack, but Haigra reached for that protein bar, which did a little bit, but because of the protein and the fiber in it, wasn't really digested in time for practice. So didn't really do much overall for Haigra's total glycogen. And then during the workout, which is burning like mostly carbs, Haigra just starts bottoming out and bonks. Everybody's bonked, and it was probably because of your glycogen. Ran out of carbs and was having to burn primarily fat, which we learned requires oxygen. And because of the intensity, Haigra just flat out couldn't get enough oxygen into her body to burn the only fuel available, which was fat. And by the end of the pieces, when Haigra was feeling completely lightheaded and blacking out a little bit, it's because there just wasn't enough energy getting to the brain. The brain was completely starved for energy, which can't burn fat. So not good overall for Haigra. Probably bad for her immune system. And then didn't eat after practice, which meant that the body continued to break itself down and hang out in this fat zone until Haigra refueled around breakfast, which caused her glycogen to shoot up because of the white carbs, which she absorbed super fast. But then the energy tanked again because those white carbs were digested and absorbed really quickly, but not stored at all. And Haigra felt pretty full, but it was all mostly fatty stuff, which kind of made Haigra feel full and sustained for a while. But because that was all still in her system, when she started to eat that bread, it was not doing much for Haigra. The bread basically wasn't able to be digested quickly because of that fat that was still hanging out in Haigra's system. And then Haigra really didn't eat before the workout and hadn't replenished her glycogen from the training the morning before, which meant that Haigra bonked again while working out. Because Haigra hadn't totally replenished glycogen stores after morning's practice, there's just no chance that Haigra was going to be able to be fully capable and ready for this post-set. But then Haigra ate that super balanced meal and slowly rebuilt her glycogen stores for the evening, which started to drop off again when Haigra slept, just because you're fasting overnight. So Haigra's getting ready for bed, 9 p.m., time to go to bed. And that's because Haigra learned that because muscle is such a low priority for the body, sleep is the primary time when it's rebuilt. There's no such thing, Alan Lem said, there's no such thing as overtraining, there's just under-resting. That's because while you're sleeping, your body doesn't have to worry about much. It can finally dedicate time to rebuilding those expensive muscles, which it really doesn't really care about during the day. So getting adequate rest is just going to support your training. And if you're not eating right, if you're not making this nutrient-rich, energy-rich environment for your body, and then you're not resting on top of that, your training is completely counterproductive. You're essentially wasting that time that you spent training. So Haigra's learned all this cool stuff and is ready to try again. So we're going to go really quickly through another Haigra day and look at that stoplight profile that I made for eating throughout the day. Starts off the day, you want to top off the tank. Now's the time for starchy stuff that you're going to digest really fast. You've got less than an hour before you work. You want stuff that you're going to digest and get the energy from super fast. You want to basically increase your blood glucose. The whole goal of a good sports nutrition strategy is to take care of your glycogen stores. So you want to be eating in a manner that preserves your glycogen stores and spares them so that you have that quality energy for as long as possible during practice so that you can be working at your maximum intensity. So you want something that's going to up your blood sugar so that your body has something to burn beside your glycogen, so it has that glucose to burn as well. That's also, like we talked about, the importance of the warm-up, which we'll look at in a second. So Haigra eats something starchy, and it bumps up her glycogen. It's also important to hydrate when you're eating a lot of carbs because we store those carbs. We create glycogen in combination with water. They're called carbohydrates because we actually store, there's like a 3-to-1 ratio of water to carbs that get stored. That's why if you stop eating carbs, you suddenly drop a lot of weight. It's mostly water weight. It's It's because we store carbs with water. So I think it's worth mentioning that if you maybe don't eat enough carbs right now and you start eating more carbs here in the next couple days or weeks or whatever, you might feel the words fluffy have been used, or yeah, mostly fluffy, gooey. It's because it's water weight and your body eventually adapts to it. But so you have to be adequately hydrated when you're eating a high carb diet. Haigra doesn't back off during the warm-up, goes pretty hard during the warm-up and actually starts to mobilize those fatty acids we talk about. It's another way to spare your glycogen. It's just another fuel source for your body to burn instead of your valuable glycogen, and just kills it, obviously. And then goes to breakfast because wants to stop that breakdown immediately, the muscle breakdown, and start rebuilding. You have to eat something after you work out or you're going to lose all your progress. So eats a good balanced meal, couple plates of mostly carbs, got whole wheat pancakes, got your oatmeal with fruit, veggies with an egg white omelet, fruit, yogurt. Haigra's not going to be working out for another couple hours, so peanut butter on apples, totally cool. Bunch of water, some milk, cereal for later. Just grabs a handful of cereal or a Ziploc bag if you bring that into Hoko. And then heads off to class. Or no, doesn't have class that day. We'll talk about that in a second. Again, so didn't bonk because of that snack that she ate before practice, and then ate this great meal, which started rebuilding Haigra's glycogen stores immediately. So Haigra knows that on days when she has that 8 a.m., Haigra's got to plan ahead because you don't want to miss that window. Most people in the survey said that they just didn't have time to grab a snack. You've got to make time. Wasting 6 minutes of sleep to throw together a peanut butter sandwich that you can eat after practice, it's worth losing that sleep. It's more valuable to you to have something to eat after practice than it is to sleep in for a couple minutes. Tamar oats, if you've never heard of them, are the best thing ever. You just mix up your oatmeal in something, your yogurt, whatever you want, your yogurt, milk, fruit and berries, in a mug the night before and leave it in the fridge, and it basically cooks overnight so that it's soft and edible in the morning. Peanut butter and jelly, trail mix, which is super high calorie, super portable, which is what you want on a to-go breakfast. Totally fine after practice. And just remember that anything after a workout is better than nothing. So whatever works for you, whatever you can grab. Protein bars are fine now. You need something after you work out. Waiting an hour after a workout is way too long. You've already missed your window to stop the muscle breakdown and start rebuilding. So this meal also kept Haigra like super alert during class, really smart. Basically, her whole life improved because she started eating this diet. And then, so lunchtime, Haigra is going to be working out again in another 3 hours, so wants to kind of keep it light, nothing too heavy, but keep building those glycogen stores and get ready for the next training session. So again, mostly carbs, fill up on fiber before you fill up on fat, because while both make you feel full, fat still takes way longer to digest than fiber, and fat usually doesn't have the nutrients that fiber does. Grab something starchy to snack on for later. Does really well in class again. Haigra's a genius now. Okay, so Haigra eats a snack before the next post set, like a bagel that she stuffed in her backpack, and has a really great post set. And if you look at this, you'll notice that snack was the difference between doing really well and basically bonking. So topped off the tank, boosted the blood glucose, and had enough glycogen and blood glucose available that she didn't bottom out and have to start burning fat. So the snack can make a huge difference. Post-workout, again, anything is better than nothing, but ideally you're looking for a 4-to-1 carb to protein ratio. Chocolate milk is touted as like a really great recovery snack just because it has almost a perfect ratio of carbs to protein. Few slices of deli meat on bread. Now's the time for your banana and peanut butter, whatever you've got handy. And the post-workout snack is just a bridge until you can eat a full meal. It's good to eat immediately and stop that breakdown, but it's best to eat a full meal as soon as possible. So it doesn't even have to be that you finish working out at 4 and you're not going to eat dinner until 5, so you eat a snack at 4 just to feel full. You want to eat, and the window is within 30 minutes of your training, but immediately is best. I mean, like, the second you stop the last piece, before you go change, before you get ready for class, start nibbling on something. As soon as you possibly can is best. And then go eat a full meal, best within an hour to do that. Has a great dinner, not going to be training for, you know, more than 3 hours, so now's the time to eat a balanced meal, but again, focusing mostly on carbs and stuff that's going to make Haigra pretty full and digest gradually throughout the night, and also while she sleeps. Grabs a banana for class, or for, you know, whenever she's hungry. Haigra ate his or her purple needs, or met his or her purple needs with beets. Doesn't really like beets, but knows to eat some at least once a week to get the purples. Will can tell you all about that. And then, so before Haigra goes to sleep, after this super great day, her roommate shares some eating concerns with her. And Haigra learned about all these cool resources at health services, like Maria Larkin, who is the school's dietitian, and anybody can make an appointment with her. She's a really amazing person, and also can help you with any of your eating needs that you possibly could have. And if she can't, she'll get you to somebody who can. And then other than that, if Haigra's roommate's not ready to go see a professional right away, there are Eating Concerns mentors, which I've got to do a plug for because I'm a member, and it's a really amazing group. We're basically students that work on a peer-to-peer level with whoever comes our way, and we help them figure out where they want to go and what resource is going to be best for them at their stage of their concerns. So those are those resources. And then here are just a few things that I used while putting this together. A lot of people talked about, a handful of people talked about using this website, which gets you nutrition information about anything you want. And it has a bunch of really cool tools. There's a nutrient search tool where you can basically plug in, if you're trying to find foods that are high in something and low in something else. Like I think I used really high in starch, really low in fiber, and it'll return a list for you. So you can use this, if you shop for yourself, this is a great way to kind of plan different things for different times of day, or for different times of the day that you're going to be eating them. And it gives you a breakdown of the ratio of carbs to fat to protein. So if you like a lot of information about what you're eating, this is the place to go. Yeah, and I forget what it finds. Really high in starch and fiber, but low in fat would be like rice. Rice is and potatoes. Rice and potatoes are great fuel for you guys, and they both contain a lot of vitamins too. And then the Australian Sports Institute, which I think is right there, Australian Sports Commission. They have tons of great information, and they publish a lot of studies. They're a really great resource. And then there's this website, 200 calories. What do 200 calories look like? And it just compares different servings. If you're not wanting to waste all the time that it takes to track every single calorie that you eat throughout the day, it's just a good idea to start knowing how to eyeball servings of stuff. So that's a good place to start if you're interested in doing that. And then just closing statements. All sports have skills that are special to that are unique to that sport. The golf has the drive. Swimming has a lot of really intricate parts to it, and we know that rowing has a ton. We've got the catch and the finish and all that. But nutrition is a skill that all athletes have to get really good at. And it's a process, and everybody makes mistakes, but as long as you're learning something about like what works best for you and what helps you get the most out of your training, you're doing it right. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions at all? Cool.
Okay, I was the woman, was it Martha?
Yeah,
Maria, Martha. I don't have as many questions about like my personal nutrition, but like would she like set things like a diet for you, or like would she work with you to like that deep of a level, or would it be kind of a rehashing of what you like? Would it be like a rehashing, like a very generic thing, or could she go even
It tends to be, she does tend to keep it relatively generic, but she does offer something like what I showed you, like a structure, like a framework of what to do. again, I've made a spreadsheet that I'm sending out to everybody for anybody who wants to break down their energy throughout the day for exactly what they need. But if you're talking about like specific foods, like tell you exactly what to eat, I tend to avoid that just because you want to stay flexible. You want to stay flexible in what you can eat or what you think you should eat. And just know that, you know, we have food constantly available to us, but you sometimes just like you just do the best that you have. And then, you know, not everybody has the dining hall. Some people are shopping for themselves. It's a good idea to just experiment with a lot of foods and figure out what works best for you. Does somebody else have a question?
I had a stupid question.
There are no stupid questions. Everybody good? Yeah. Yay. Thanks for coming. I know it's Friday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelsey.
You're welcome. Anybody want to swipe me in for dinner? I'll let you think about it. No, it's a big